Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from the Lone Star State. We're parked here in Katy, Texas at the Loves. We just got done dropping over at FedEx. We just to kind of catch up. So I had a trip out of I hooked a load in Pittston at our terminal. So I get to outbound and I'm like, hey, I need the bills for this load. And they're like, oh, well, the previous driver said he left the bills at the receiver. I'm like, oh, okay. So I contact dispatch and I'm like, hey, what do you want me to do? And they're like, oh, just go down there and explain it to him. Yeah, that really didn't fly. There was a mean lady at the receiver. Like, there was a nice woman, and then there was this mean lady. And they call me. They're like, hey, come, back into door 7. I'm like, hey, I don't have, and then bring your bills in. And I'm like, well, hey, I don't have the bills. This guy said he left them. And then the old lady, the mean old lady in the background chimes in. He did not, blah, 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 right? So the other gal that I was talking to was like, okay. I said, she goes, I'll call you back. So then she calls me back a little bit later and says, hey, back into door 7. And then the mean old lady's like, he needs to come over here and talk to me about these bills. So I'm like, okay. So I drive all the way around the other side of this warehouse and I go in, excuse me, product placement, not really. I go in and she gives, while I'm standing in front of the window, she just wants to lecture me about the importance of bills of lading. Like, it's my first trip I ever hauled a load anywhere. And she's like, how am I supposed to receive this? What do you want me to do? I'm like, I don't know. I can't receive it without bills. And in my mind, I'm like, you called me in here to tell me this? Why'd you tell me to go to? So I said, so do you want me to go to the door or not? Well, no. Right? So I said, well, she goes, somebody's going to have to email me some bills or something. I said, well, I've already contacted my company to see what the issue is. So then I get in my truck and I'm driving completely back around the complex and I get an email saying, hey, we're going to email you bills in a minute. And I said, okay. So I called the lady back and I said, what's your email address? And I emailed her the bills. But I was like the victim here. I was the victim. I kind of should have put my foot down, although here's the thing, the load paid really well. And so that's why I left without the bills. I should have just forced them to give me the bills before I left. But I wanted to be on time. And as it turned out, I ended up spending 5 hours at that place. So anyway, we got done there, and then I got this follow-on load that was like crappy. I mean, I seldom reject a load, but it's crappy. It was hauling cardboard, hauling packaging from like New Jersey to Ogden, Utah. But the pickup wasn't until like 1900 on Saturday night. And I'm like, screw that. So I went home. So Connie and I just went. We parked in a supermarket here at the parking lot. My wife drove over, picked us up. We got to do some laundry. I got to sleep in my own bed for a few hours. Got a haircut. And then because I had rejected that load, I got the day dispatcher on Saturday was filling in on my team, and I got this FedEx load out of New Jersey. So basically I picked up 2 hours later, and it was a lot less brain damage, and it was 1,000 less miles and paid like $1,000 more. So we just have to drive hard to get here, but it all worked out. So we're taking a little break, doing some personal hygiene, stuff like that. But anyway, I'm here in Katy, Texas, on the outskirts of Houston. Houston, by the way, is named after Sam Houston. There's a life-size statue of him right off of Interstate 45. Apparently Sam Houston was like 78 feet tall, so he was like as big as Goliath. Nah, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so we're down here. Lone Star State. Capital is Austin, of course. The biggest city is Houston. Also one of the biggest cities in America. Houston's kind of like driving around the Houston area is a hassle nowadays. It's kind of like Los Angeles, but with humidity and butt tons of rain, and flooded streets a lot of times. So anyway, that's up to date with us. I wanted to talk a little bit about the driver shortage, or really the bigger question is there a driver shortage or is there not? So I've been doing a little reading on this, and one article I saw said, no, there's not a driver shortage because 450,000 people a year get CDLs in this country. And truck driver is the largest occupation in 29 different states. All that's true, by the way. But the thesis of this article, right, is that there can't be a driver shortage because we have so many people that hold CDLs. And the problem is retention, okay? But, okay, so if you can't retain enough people, is it possible you have a shortage? Well, yeah, I think so. And they pointed out that the ATA has been saying for 15, 20 straight years that there's a driver shortage. Now, the ATA, for those of you who don't know, is the industry organization that basically represents the biggest carriers in America, right? American Trucking Association. So this advocacy group, this trade group for all the giant carriers that laments the fact that there's a driver shortage, is also basically made up of the carriers who treat their employees like crap. And so, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you have a business that has over 100% turnover annually, you got to kind of look at the management and go, do you really have a shortage as much as you got a problem with treating people like human beings? That's one piece of it. But the other piece of it is that I don't think Americans really understand the trucking industry. They think one truck driver is like another truck driver is like another truck driver is like another. And that's just not true. There are people that I've always been an over-the-road guy, but I can tell you that the LTL world is different. The local delivery, pickup and delivery guys that work for the LTL companies that aren't the line haul, that's even different, right? And then you have all sorts of other jobs that fall in between. How people get work. There's a lot of variation here. So I think it's unwise for the news media to talk about this shortage as if it doesn't exist. And they're suggesting that, there's not a labor problem in the trucking industry. That really, and now I agree with this part of their thesis, the problem isn't lack of truck drivers, it's lack of compensation and motivation, benefits, etc., that would get people into the cabs of trucks. That is true. Now, they say that you can go out, a lot of truckers leave the industry because of the low pay. But the truth also is a little bit more nuanced. There are about 80,000 people that hold CDLs that are not eligible to drive a truck because they're in the FMCSA clearinghouse for drug or alcohol issues. Excuse me again. That's not the fault of any company. It's just the fault of the drivers. Whether those people will go through the rehabilitation process, and I use that term loosely. It's you basically have to remediate, right? That's a question that remains unanswered. A lot of the people that get CDLs, though, remember they said about 450,000 people? That includes, I guarantee that they were unable to break out what those CDLs are used for. Here's an example. There are jobs working for private companies, like a good example would be railroads. Railroads hire maintenance of way workers to work on the train tracks, maintain all the road beds, ties, switches, etc. Very often, they have several people on a crew that have CDLs. Why? Because they have big trucks that they operate. Either big straight trucks, or in some cases, if they have even heavier equipment to haul around, they have their own semis. I've seen Union Pacific, BNSF semis, parked in places. Those guys have CDLs, but their job, okay, is not called truck driver. It's called maintenance of way. They're a maintenance of way worker. That's how the railroad classifies them. Okay? Other people get CDLs just to drive school buses. Other people get CDLs that, if you see a FedEx, here's an example. FedEx Custom Critical. If you see a FedEx Custom Critical, but they're driving like a Sprinter or a Ford Transit van, those people have CDLCs with a hazmat endorsement. The only reason they get the CDL is because they have to have the hazmat endorsement to work for FedEx Custom Critical. So those are just a few examples of people that hold CDLs that do not drive 53-foot vans or 53-foot reefers or flatbeds or whatever. So it really is important to kind of drill down and understand what the shortage looks like. The other thing that's going on is in the drayage industry, a lot of drivers, they say, oh, there's a shortage of drivers. But in many cases, it's not a shortage of drivers, it's a shortage of availability of the ports. A lot of ports aren't open 24/7. So like, if you're an over-the-road driver, especially if you do refrigerated, you're used to delivering and picking up at all kind of crazy hours, right? Middle of the night, whatever. Holidays, weekends, it doesn't matter. We're always moving something. But a lot of the ports they don't operate like that. They've just gone to a 24/7 regime. In some, like I think out in Los Angeles and Long Beach. But I don't even know what like the rest of the ports, like Charleston, Baltimore, Tacoma. I don't know what those ports are doing. So anyway, it's just, there are differences in this industry. But here's what I do know. Okay, when you take all this, right? Oh, and by the way, there's one CEO. There's an article in CDL Life. This guy's name is Robert Biesterfeld, and he's the CEO of C.H. Robinson, which is a big logistics company. He suggests that we need to loosen immigration standards so we could get more drivers behind the wheel. Now, I know that's not going to sit well with a lot of people. I've already talked about this a little bit, but I don't really care if they loosen immigration standards. I actually think we should really loosen immigration standards in this country, because we're stagnant in our population growth, and that's a bad thing for the economy. It's a bad thing for national security. It's a bad thing all around. We have places that are depopulating, and like Alabama had negative population growth last year. I mean, I know Alabama's like a third world country in many respects, but negative population growth in an entire state is a very, very bad sign. If we can't make up for it with births to U.S. citizens or births to people living in the United States, we need to get more people some other way. And it's not just for the trucking shortage. I could speak at length about the value of growing the population. And oh, by the way, immigrants are not going to take anybody's jobs. Okay, this guy, what he's saying is, it's his idea because he sees a problem and he sees a quick solution to it. Okay, but I don't think he would be in favor of increased immigration if it wasn't for truck drivers, you know. But anyway, there are a lot of voices on this subject, but I think the bottom line continues to be working conditions and pay, right? And also, trucking companies don't do a great job of managing expectations, right? Trucking companies don't do a great job of supporting drivers when they're on the road. I read a thing about a driver who passed away on the road, and his family basically had to go to a charity to get his body back home. Like, I feel like if a driver passes away on the road, the least the trucking company could do is pay for him to get home, right? One last time. And you know, it really is like I talked to a guy the other day who got coronavirus, and he was very, very sick, and he was actually, I think he was down here in Texas, and it was so bad that his wife came down here, so she had travel expenses and all that stuff, and they towed his truck back to a terminal because he was really, really sick. But they had to fight with the company to get reimbursement. And you know, that shouldn't be. That should be automatic. Other businesses, it would be automatic. So anyway, I think there is a shortage of drivers, but I don't think it's for the reasons that the news media thinks. Because I don't think they really understand what this industry is all about, and how many moving parts there are. You know, when you just lump all truck drivers together, it's not any different than lumping all doctors together and just assuming that, you know, everybody that graduates from medical school does the exact same job. There's no such thing as an anesthesiologist or a pathologist or an orthopedic surgeon or a general family medicine. They're just all exactly the same. That's how they look at the trucking industry. The only reason they know the difference in the medical world is because it impacts them personally. But they don't know how something gets from A to B. They just know it came in a truck, so it must be a truck driver. So anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. If you guys got opinions about stuff, I'm glad to hear it. I've also, by the way, reached out to a reporter at Business Insider who wrote about terrible conditions for drayage drivers in certain port areas. So I reached out to her, and I want to kind of fill in some blanks for her on some issues. So hopefully she'll get back with me. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there. It's going to be like 80 some degrees today, so I'm going to go get a shower and put shorts on. Although I'm probably going to be jumping the gun because we'll probably get a load out of here going to, like, I don't know, Alaska or someplace cold. So anyway, talk to you soon. Bye.